our reason for ignoring how serious all of that is because we're thinking the Earth, this big full Earth, how could we change that? But the thing is, if we change our model to think that our living is all just in this very, kind of shallow, 3 to 10 miles or so area around the Earth, that's what we're affecting. So he's by the way, he did die, so that's a shame, but he's quite an interesting French author. So when you're thinking of Thomas Kuhn's argument about a paradigm shift, this is another example. He's actively trying to change our paradigm to something that he thinks will enable us to be much more cautious about the impacts we're having on our environment. So that's Bruno Latour, if you're interested in him. He is on my list, I'm pretty sure. He should be, for those that are interested in doing him. And I also have to, in talking about John Stuart Mill, talk a little bit about Jeremy Bentham, because utilitarianism was actually invented by Jeremy Bentham. Actually, there's probably others even before him that are trying to do this stuff. But Jeremy, who, by the way, in retrospect, people think he might have had Asperger's. Never married, didn't have any children, all kinds of interesting characteristics that lead people to think he might have had that kind of genius and social inability at the same time. And yet he did start along with James Mill, who was John Stuart Mill's father, they started a new political party, Philosophic Radicals, which you've never heard of because, well, that's how well they started that party. It didn't go over. But what they're trying to do is build things on a principle of utility, and the principle of utility is the greatest good for the greatest number. So why is this a problem? Well, remember Kant gives us a categorical imperative, and for Kant, our morals should be based on our intuition. Our intuition says, don't do this, do this, right? But what we discover, of course, is that different people have different intuitions. They're not all from Königsberg. They don't all think the way Kant does. And a perfect example of this is the ongoing crisis in even the way you talk about the place seems to put you into one category or the other. Do you call it Israel, or do you call it Palestine, or Gaza? What do you call it? Automatically you're putting yourself into a group of people who have an intuition that puts them into a conflict with the other. And by the way, according to Hegel's theories, you don't always have good and evil. In fact, I'm not sure that there is such an ideal situation where you're going to clearly have good versus evil. I mean, we've got, of course, movies that do that to us. If you think about Harry Potter, as of course I always do, right? Harry Potter is this conflict between good and evil, and the good is Harry and his friends and love, and Voldemort, whose main concern is the avoidance of death, basically, at least on his part. He could care less about other people, but so he comes across as pure evil. By the way, notice President Biden in talking about what happened with Hamas. It refers to them as pure evil, right? I'm not trying to take sides on this. That's, of course, what gets the academic communities in the United States in trouble right now, because people say, how could you not take sides on this? It's our job not to take sides on this, because our job is to teach how we can recognize all of these different intuitive perspectives, right? How can you be open to those and understand them if you teach that one particular perspective is the correct one? And by the way, we're teaching that the one correct perspective on all of this is the Hegelian perspective, and that is that you can have multiple perspectives, each of which have their own truths and their own intuitive rights and wrongs that are in conflict with one another. So not all conflicts are between good and evil. Some of them are between, well, maybe all of them are between groups that have different conceptions of what is good and evil. So it's a much more complex situation. Because you can't just decide, oh, I'm on this side, and those people that, if I were on their side and I grew up that way, I would think the way they do. I would believe the things that they do. And children naturally grow up and believe the things that they do in that environment, right? And I grew up in this environment, so of course I naturally believe these things. Well, so that would put me at Diamond High, for the football game against, Chugiak, right? I'd be out there rooting for the team. It wouldn't even occur to me that maybe today I should be rooting for Diamond. No, you wouldn't do that. I'm with Chugiak, right? No, I'm with Diamond. Which one? Do we have a riot? No. By the way, that's because unlike the British or the Spanish or a lot of others, we grow up believing, well, it's the team thing. That's actually a good sport for us to participate in because it takes some of this passion out of us without causing actual harm to the opponents. We're all in this for the game. It's not a matter of who wins, it's a matter of how you play the game. Didn't we all learn that some time in our youth, right? That's not what they say, when you're, cheering for Le Bleu, right? This is, they fight over that stuff. All right, the Chudley Cannons, whoever, right? Am I making sense, or am I just going bonkers today? There's so many things that are interesting. But if this is the case, how do you decide what is good? Can it be scientifically understood what good is by science and not some kind of intuition? Well, it's a problem for us, thanks to actually even as far back as David Hume, who points out that if I have an argument, I would write normally, but if you have an argument and you have premises to a conclusion, right? The premises, if they're true and it's a valid argument, the conclusion must also follow, right? How do you know that the premises are true? Well, they have to be facts, right? And if I know what a fact is, it has to be all horses are animals, or no dogs or cats, right? The Aristotelian kinds of statements, right? Guess what? You can't say, this is a good cup, right? Didn't I, right? This is a cup, that's a fact. This is a good cup, we have different opinion on that. Well, it turns out all value statements are opinions, and you can't demonstrate them scientifically. Why not? Why can't we? And there are folks that insist that we can. A perfect contemporary who wants to do this.
Sam Harris.
How did you know? I was thinking, yeah. Did we talk about that already, or
No.
You just know.
I've just gone through his book before. That's his whole. That's one of his whole things.
Yeah.
It is
So,
not a good book.
well, I'm in a commercial, aren't I?
Wants to snore. So no more hiding under your pillow, because this system actually detects snoring, then adjusts.
Is it good for us to have these commercials mandatory in class when I try to get to a particular...
Get ad block.
I'm going to speak today about the relationship between science and human values.
Hey, don't stop. What are you doing?
Now, it's generally understood that questions of morality questions of good and evil and right and wrong, are questions about which science
What? Is this going to give me a commercial and say, hey, you know, you could have much better YouTube if you pay this much money? Is that what it's gonna happen?
Try refreshing it.
Won't that just bring up the commercial again?
Well, the thing's frozen, so I mean, I don't know.
No, that didn't fix it. Let's try. All right, I'll just tell you, hey, the whole machine is busted.
Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. Oh.
Well, maybe not. All right.
Machine spirit is
I
angry.
killed it, so I'll just, okay. Let me just tell you briefly what his 15-minute TED Talk is about. He's going to argue from a utilitarian point of view that, yes, you can use science, and how does he know this? Because the premises are absolutely so clear. How can this not be the case? He says to the audience full of people who all agree with him. Right, and so he doesn't get the difficulty that Hume gives us, that if you have a premise, it has to be a fact. If your premise turns out to be a value statement, you can't prove that that's a fact. So your argument is doing what's called the naturalistic fallacy. You're assuming that our naturalistic intuitions are true, when in fact we understand from what happened through philosophy that no, that our intuitive values are dependent on how we grew up. Remember, David Hume was a communitarian, so the values you believe in come from your community. Different communities have different values. I might ask, what would you think of, a gang of people beating up a woman, taking her out of her car and beating her up? Evil, right? Call the police, get these guys. What if you were in a country where those were the police, and they were beating her up because she was a woman, driving a car without her husband? My goodness. That's their intuition, right? That sounds absolutely hard. That's true, by the way. Yes? Yeah, every time I think of woman, I look at you. That's kind of interesting. I should probably have more control over what I say. You're blushing. I don't know why. Why you? I'm old enough. I can say whatever I think, and if I get in trouble. So
I love that. You should put that on a little banner.
I learned that from
there.
Tweety Bird, I think, when I was a kid. Okay, so utilitarian, the greatest good for the greatest number. But how do you do that? How do you figure out what the greatest good is? Jeremy thinks, anybody remember where Jeremy is? Jeremy thinks we can use what he calls a hedonistic calculus. Hedonistic. You've heard of hedonism before, yes? What is a hedonist? Someone who just believes in pleasure, period, right? So a hedon, one hedon, is an element of pleasure. You have 10 hedons, that's more pleasure than one hedon, right? So I try to, how can I be utilitarian here? My family all wants to go to the state fair. The kids are all excited. My wife wants to go. She loves to sit and watch the quilt show, right? Which bores me to tears. But in any case, she wants to go there, right? And so I walk around and I look at other things and so on while she's at the quilt show, where this quilt was doing da-da-da-da. Sorry, that's just, not me. I would rather stay home in the sun and sit on the back deck and read Hegel. So I think, if I sit on the back deck and read Hegel, that's 20 hedons of pleasure, right? If we go to the fair, I lose that 20 hedons of pleasure. But my wife gets 25 heathens of pleasure for watching the quilt show. My kids all get 20 years. Yeah. So when I add that all up, it's pretty clear the greatest good for the greatest number in this particular situation would be that we go to the fair. So we do. We go to the fair. Use the utilitarian method, the hedonistic calculus, to figure out whether we should go there or not, right?